Namaskar. On behalf of India Foundation, it is my privilege to extend a warm welcome to all of you. I am Dr. Pawan Chaurasia, a research fellow at India Foundation, and I am delighted that we are all gathered here to discuss the book Operation Sindoor, 88 Hours that Redefined Deterrence. This discussion has been deliberately scheduled to coincide with a significant moment, the first anniversary of Operation Sindoor. On the night of 6-7th May 2025, the Indian Armed Forces carried out precision strikes on 9 terrorist camps in Pakistan in response to the heinous terrorist attack in Pahalgam a fortnight earlier. That operation marked a decisive shift, redefined deterrence, and establishing a new strategic normal in India-Pakistan relations. The book we discuss today is authored by Major General Dhruv Katoch, Director of India Foundation, and Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, member of the UPSC, and has been published by Suruchi Prakashans, New Delhi. The event has been jointly organized by India Foundation and India Habitat Center. As the book has just been published, the discussion will be preceded by its formal launch. We are deeply honored to have General N.C. Vij, former Chief of Army Staff, with us to do the honors. May I request you, sir, to kindly come onto the stage. I would also invite the authors, General Dhruv Katoch and General Raj Shukla, to please join us on the stage. May I request General N.C. Vij and the authors to kindly do the honors and launch the book. Thank you so much, sir, for doing the honors. May I now request the discussants of the book, Air Marshal Rajesh Kumar, former Commander-in-Chief, Strategic Forces Command of India, and Dr. Shalini Chawla, Distinguished Fellow, Center for Aerospace Power and Strategic Studies, along with the authors and moderator of this session, Captain Alok Bansal, the Executive Vice President of India Foundation, to kindly come to the dais. May I request Captain Alok Bansal to kindly carry forward the proceedings.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's discussion on this fascinating book, Operation Sindoor, 88 Hours that Redefined Deterrence. And I think there is no doubt that this was a significant event as far as India was concerned. And India Foundation has had a knack for the right timing. And that's why I think you are seeing this particular event taking place today. In fact, I think on 5th of May 2025 in the evening, we had a discussion on what should be India's response. And unknown to us, I think the same night we had the development that took place. This book is fascinating because it not only talks about Op Sindoor, as many others have done, it also it gives a very detailed background of the relationship between two countries, especially Jammu and Kashmir, what happened, and it also talks about futuristic propositions. I think in the fitness of things, it would be right for me to keep my mouth shut and give a chance to the author. I'll first request Major General Dhruv Katoch to kindly take about 10 minutes to introduce the book.
Namaskar. Before I begin, let me express my deep gratitude to General Vij, former Chief of Army Staff and Honorary Colonel of the Dogra Regiment, a regiment to which I have the privilege of belonging, for his gracious presence here today. Thank you so much, sir. And also for launching this book. I also extend my sincere thanks to all of you for taking time out from your busy schedule to join us this evening, especially for the group of Sherwood who is here and my batchmates from NDC. Thank you so much. And my coursemates also from the NDA. The timing of this book, of this particular book launch is deliberate. Today marks the first anniversary of Operation Sindoor. On the night of 6th-7th May, 1 year ago, in what can only be described as a precise, clinical and calibrated operation, the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force struck 9 terrorist targets deep within Pakistan. 7 of these were neutralized by the Indian Army and 2 by the Indian Air Force. And all of this took place within a period of about 20 to 30 minutes. Simultaneously, the Indian Navy had deployed a carrier battle group in the Western Indian Ocean, and it was poised for action should the need arise. This decisive response followed the heinous terrorist attack at Baisaran Meadow in Pahalgaon just 2 weeks earlier, on 22nd of April, 2025. India's initial intent was limited. It was to deliver a clear message and restore deterrence. However, as Pakistan chose to escalate, India responded with increasing force. The conflict culminated on 10th of May when, in a swift and overwhelming offensive, the Indian Air Force struck 11 Pakistani air bases, including Mushaf at Sargodha and Noor Khan near Rawalpindi. With its airspace rendered vulnerable, Pakistan sought a ceasefire, bringing the operation to a close. In just 88 hours, Operation Sindoor became the shortest India-Pakistan war, yet one with the most profound consequences. It redefined India's red lines, and it called Pakistan's nuclear bluff. And above all, it demonstrated a rare alignment of political resolve and military capability. Just as importantly, it reshaped India's self-perception and its projection of power on the global stage. I structured this book in 3 parts. Part 1, we examined Jammu and Kashmir, its history, accession, and the turbulent decades that followed, leading to deep-rooted radicalization. It also explores Pakistan, its ideological evolution, the dominance of its military establishment, and its enduring hostility towards India. As Pakistan radicalized, it institutionalized terrorism as an instrument of state policy, which has often been described as a strategy of bleeding India with 1,000 cuts. Understanding this mindset is critical. Unless the costs imposed on Pakistan become prohibitive, this strategy will persist. Operation Sindoor, therefore, cannot remain a one-off response, that we have done Operation Sindoor and everything is okay. It must signal the beginning of a sustained deterrence. And I call it, we have to continue with this to form what I call the policy of compellence. Equally important is introspection. The abrogation of Article 370 was a necessary and long overdue step. For decades, the Indian state responded to growing radicalization in Jammu and Kashmir with hesitation and restraint. We witnessed unspeakable violence, yet often chose silence. Even the genocide of Kashmiri Hindus in 1990 failed to evoke the national response it deserved. Chilling slogans, and I'll just read out 2 of them in Kashmiri, Raliv, Galiv, Ya Chaliv. And the second one, Assi Gachi, Pakistan. I won't go into the rest of it. Meaning simply, and these statements were made by the common Muslims against their Hindu neighbors. People who had lived with them for hundreds of years. They had been living together. That was the extent of radicalization. And what these statements meant was, convert, leave or die. That's the first one. And the second one meant very simply, we want Pakistan, we will convert this into Pakistan. We don't want your men, leave your women behind. I do not think any society could have degenerated to that extent as that. These were not fringe expressions. They were done by the common man. They were not done by the terrorists. And they reflected the depth of radicalization that had taken root. Governments, both in Srinagar and Delhi, failed to act decisively. And as a nation, we did not confront this reality with the clarity it deserved. To that extent, the governments failed, the media failed, and we, the people of India, all of us, we failed. We still have not given them justice. Terrorism thrives when it is not confronted head on. That is a lesson we must never forget. Part 2 focuses on the conduct of Operation Sindoor itself. It was not merely a military action. It was the whole of nation response. Political will, tri-service synergy, and all instruments of national power converged to achieve a clearly defined objective. The book also engages with key debates. Aircraft losses, the rationale behind accepting a ceasefire, and the broader information and narrative war. It examines Donald Trump's claims and assesses the international dimension, particularly America's role. Modern conflict is no longer fought only on the battlefield. It is equally contested in the domain of perception. This is an area where we must invest far greater attention. Part 3 looks to the future. Operation Sindoor, like other ongoing conflicts across the world, underscores the changing character of war. Future conflicts will span multiple domains: land, air, sea, cyber, space, and information. The distinction between the front lines and the hinterland will blur. Today, it is not the front which is the battlefield. The whole nation is the battlefield. This section discusses what India must do to prepare for this reality. My co-author, Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, will elaborate further on these aspects. He is the one who has written this complete chapter without any inputs from my side. I would like to conclude by paying homage to the 26 innocent civilians who were murdered in cold blood in Pahalgaon on 22nd May last year. Their memory must remain a constant reminder of what is at stake. And I offer my deepest salutations to the brave men and women of India's armed forces, whose courage, professionalism, and resolve delivered justice through Operation Sindoor. Thank you. Jai Bharat. Jai Hind.
Thank you, General Katoch. As you can see, this book is authored by 2 authors, and our second author is actually slated to fly away from here. So before he leaves, I'll just request General Shukla to make his comments.
So thank you, General N.C. Vij, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Jai Hind. Grateful that you turned up. Thank you for your time. Do read the book, read it and critique it, even tear it to shreds, because that's the only way the national security story will, continue to evolve. Now, this book, frankly, is the labor of love of General Katoch. The concept, ideation, planning, structure, that whole bit about Kashmir, the radicalization, and he has reasoned very well why this was a righteous war and why justice needed to be served, and it was served. So that part is his. I was a late entrant in Whitey, and part 3 is mine, which is Beyond Sindoor. And here I have laid out, a 3-layered hypothesis or an argument for your kind consideration. The first part, in my view, is that Operation Sindoor militarily was an overwhelming success. I mean, we should have really no qualms to say that. People of my generation hit Pakistan on a map. This was the first time I saw Rawalpindi being hit, Raiwind being hit. And you know, there was this controversy about aircraft loss. Many of those who raised those controversies from the West, I'm told the Americans in those 2 days when the airmen were down and in epic fury have lost more aircraft in epic fury than they have lost since Vietnam. I mean, so aircraft losses, in hindsight, what was that question? I mean, not playing Coco, it was a battle. So, I mean, that was kind of the only reverse. Otherwise, it was an astounding military success. And I'm sure military to military Pakistan knows it. On the 10th of May, the defenses were shattered, the state was battered, the skies were naked. It could have gone on had they not begged for mercy through international interlocutors. I mean, so that's my understanding of the battle. But the point I want to lay out is this, that battle is about, in my view, about a pest. There are larger threats. And therefore, we have to look at the national security makeover. And in my view, that what we saw in Sindoor is a consequence of the reforms that began around 2014. Now, before you accuse me of making a political point, let me say in the past, 71 was an outstanding victory. The time that General Sundarji and Mr. Rajiv Gandhi got along, we had a wonderful phase, defense spending exceeding 3%. So there have been phases in the past. Kargil also was a major reform, but they were always halting, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I hope this doesn't happen this time. So why do I say this? The origins of Sindoor lay in steps like CDS-DMA. They're game-changing, new normals in our strategic outlook. This whole business of Atmanirbharta and defense, where this time we are saying that it has to be the private sector and startups at the heart of that endeavor. And it's happening. Could you have imagined that HAL will be out of an AMCA bid? It's happened. A lot of these startups are doing wonderful work. They are being recognized by US Spacecom, so on. Just yesterday, Galaxy has launched that satellite, Optico-SAR. If we had this persistent surveillance, Galwan might not have happened. So a lot of good stuff is happening, but my argument is that we must rejoice, celebrate Sindoor, but the wiser thing is to use it as a springboard to do faster, deeper reforms, to complete the national security makeover. And here I just want to make, 2-3 points. Why should we do it? One is because of the gravity of the strategic calculus. I don't need to elaborate, this audience knows. But what I would really like to point out, and the military renaissance that is sweeping global theaters. And I don't think sometimes we have got a real sense of what is happening. So this is what I would like to just emphasize in the next 2 to 3 minutes. And I would like to call on the younger scholars here to take these metrics and take these narrations forward. Because unless you take these narrations forward of what is happening across the globe, there will not be sufficient pressure on our strategic military system to reform. So the first is the character of war. Around Ukraine, Iran, there's no time to elaborate, but I'm saying General Mark Milley says the changes in the character of war have been the most profound in recorded history. Others say that, there was gunpowder, there were nuclear weapons, and now it is dronery and AI and all these kinds of technologies which are coming together in fascinating ways. And so the point that I make is that we must look at our defense budget. If our defense budget is about tanks and artillery and fighter platforms, good. But if the budget does not reflect data readiness, AI, offensive ISR, cloud infrastructure, space, cyber, quantum, robotics, we are preparing for the last and not the next war. So we seriously need to analyze this. The second is not only the character of war, the business modeling. The combat capacities to fleets and formations today is being delivered by the business agility of startups. Innovations are happening in weeks, software innovations in 2 weeks, hardware innovations in 4 weeks. You cannot have RFPs, no matter how perfect they are, being churned out in 2 years. It's just not going to happen. The DRDO PSU framework is severely challenged. Either you reform or the startups have to come in. This transformation at the rate of tinkering will no longer do. I mean, we are fooling ourselves, and you just have to look at this. Look at the time frames. I keep pointing out there is Palmer Luckey from a startup called Anduril. Till 8 years back, he was having fun with VR headsets. This year, he has churned out a YX44 Fury, which is a stealth-enabled, near-stealth, AI-enabled, unmanned fighter platform, and it has been flight tested in 568 days, not AMCA 10 years. We have to change time frames. And if you go deeper into this, you will find that these products cannot be ordered from Delhi. These innovations grow by the day, by the month, and the hour. So the entire procurement frame has been, forward located to army commanders. It's not going to happen in Delhi. And I'm making this assertion. I would really request the scholars to go into these things. And if they are true, then we must implement them. The third is power of asymmetry and the salience of cost. Today, the Shahid is as lethal as the Tomahawk. In fact, all the 13 American bases, they took care of the missiles. They were vulnerable about the drones. I'm told every $1 that the Iranians have invested in the Shahid, it costs the West $28 to intercept them. If you take the missile mathematics further, between the Shahid and the Patriot, it is 114:1 cost disadvantage to the defender. And there are a whole lot of statistics there. And the power of asymmetry. Ukraine, a country without an air force or a navy on the back of technological innovation, has held Russia at bay for 4 years. I'm making a case we need to go deeply into all this. Those of you who have the time, study Det 201, an initiative of getting CTOs from the West into the American military to take out the fluff. If we do all this, we can become so much more efficient. And who deserves this? The soldiers, sailors, and airmen that General Dhruv Katoch spoke about. They deserve it, the very best at least cost. So the new combat mantra is greater lethality at lower cost. So we must look into this. The third is advent of dronery as supreme warcraft. I mean, I'll just take 2 minutes. Along the Russian-Ukrainian frontier, there is a death zone. This is what the soldiers call it. It's a reality, 35 kilometers, that side, this side. Artillery has been pushed back, outrange. Tanks don't move. Infantrymen are picked up by surveillance drones and taken out by FPVs in 6 minutes. This year, Ukraine is buying 8 million drones, more than the artillery they fired last year. 60% of Russian casualties have come from drones, not artillery, not armor, not infantry. General Patriot says that in our time, combined arms was infantry, company, squadron, artillery. He says today it is 4 Russian soldiers or Ukrainian soldiers on a golf cart, because you know these images of the tanks and all that, so they're taken out. So every time a new thing. So a golf cart with 2 surveillance drones for picking up the targets and 6 kill drones to hit. So it is drones, drones, drones. That is how remarkable the whole transition is. So I'm saying it's a whole new warcraft. If we can replicate this lethality along the LC and the LAC, see how it would have transformed. And the fourth point is salience of AI in algorithmic warfare. They have arrived. It's not of the future. Last month, the Russians, by the way, the Russians who were behind 6 years in this AI and all related technologies have now caught up. The lag is just 2. They've been working so hard at it. Both the Ukrainians, the Americans, and the Russians have created these AI-enabled command and control systems called Delta, Maven, and SVG, something in Russian, which enables you through AI from pick to kill 6 minutes. And it is these combinations together. So last month, they fired the first swarm of drones, AI-enabled, lethal, completely autonomous, target selection and engagement by machines, not humans. Humans out of the loop. Now, these are the kinds of changes that are taking place. I'll give you just one last example and wind up. Venezuela, pattern of life. What did they do with Maven and Claude? So Maven and Claude, which is the AI LLM of Anthropic, it enabled them to map the pattern of life competencies. So they knew what Maduro was doing over the last 72 hours. What time he got up, when did he change his safe houses, all that. And based on that, they now fired natural language queries, and the responses that you are getting is in a common operational picture. So you say, where will he be 24 hours from now? What is the best asset combination to hit him? And you get those live queries. And so the Delta Force guys were brought in and said, this is what he's going to do in the next 48 hours. Choose your points of insertion and extraction. From my generation, it's such a big change. We used to wonder of maps. And the last point, they said, no, this is the assault window we want. So cyber was, in our case, cyber agency keeps protecting some site somewhere. Here the cyber guy was called in and said, create this opportunity. And how did they do it? They took out, mobiles, communications, electricity grid was brought down. So you created the right assault window for the helicopter retrieving formations to land them. Now this is just fascinating, beyond measure. If Ukraine can do it, if the 8.10 to 8.15, 28 February, Maven Claude, because the targeting packages are now being run by AI at machine speed and not human speed, you take out 50 of the top Iranian leadership, decapitation strikes. So space, cyber, data is not theory now. It's all happening. And we will be really amiss if we don't work on these things. And there are some other issues like, Sudarshan Chak, how should we actualize it? Strategic communications, I think a big weakness with us. Military diplomacy. I mean, we must concede. Asim Munir speaks to Trump every day. Shouldn't we have at least a 3-star in IPACOM, a 3-star in... We must up our game in military diplomacy, because nuclear posture, once again, at least in the 1990s, there was so much written about the nuclear posture. China has done a virtual nuclear breakout, and I see nothing being written in our circles about this. So these are some of the areas we should look at. Use, in my view, Sindoor as a springboard to complete this national security makeover. And if we can complete this national security makeover, it will be a historic achievement. Thank you.
Thank you, General Shukla, for articulating what should India do. Well, although the three services were involved in Operation Sindoor, when you talk to a layman, he probably thinks it's only an Air Force war. And I think the book has been authored by 2 army generals. So I think it would be in the fitness of the things that the first discussant person to discuss the book should be an Air Force personnel. So I have Air Marshal Rajesh Kumar, who's a former Commander-in-Chief of the Strategic Forces Command of the India. So to be the first discussant, I'll request him to speak for about 10 to 15 minutes.
General Page, the authors, Tractor India Foundation, and all fellow audience. Firstly, I'd like to thank India Foundation and India Habitat Center for inviting me to give my views. I read this book with great interest, Operation Sindoor, 88 Hours That Redefined Deterrence. And just by knowing the authors, one knew that the book would be interesting because General Katoch has a long academic record and he has published so many articles, and he has extensive knowledge of Kashmir's history, and therefore, and the book has been written in a very easygoing style. So it was very interesting to read the book. And of course, General Raj Shukla, who's a well-known strategic thinker and has extensive experience in Kashmir. Also, I've heard him on many occasions, and what he propounded just now about the part 3 of the book, I have heard many of his views in the past before as well, and he has been quite consistent in articulating some of those views, and those views are very well encapsulated in the book. From my point of view, after reading the book, having co-authored a book on Op Sindoor myself, I will say that this book brings a unique perspective to Op Sindoor. It has an in-depth look at the history of Kashmir, the saga of bloodshed, the manner in which the last 500 years have been, and how the rulers have changed, and what changes they brought out in Kashmir bring out very much the picture as to why this history has reached this particular point. And not only does it look at the old history, it also looks at the history past independence and where the radicalization began, and how the whole situation came to a boil, and where the trouble started. there's a very interesting aspect in this book also which brings out the role of the British post-independence in the Kashmir dispute and the whole great game theory that was played out between Britain and Russia, and the British perfidy in the manner in which we lost Gilgit to Pakistan. So I think there are fascinating aspects of history in this book, and those of you, the young scholars who wish to delve deeper into this, I think this is an excellent book to understand how the whole history and how the trouble started. Of course, the book looks also at how Article 370 has changed some of the issues, and it's been covered in great detail. And finally, in the attack in Besaran Meadow, the way it was carried out, the manner in which the perpetrators, each of which have been identified, and there's been evidence to how they were the perpetrators, the planning and execution of that particular mission from the Pakistan side, and subsequently the planning and execution of the Indian response. I think it's very interesting, the factors that were taken into account for planning, how the decisions were taken as to what we're going to do, why we're going to attack only bases, the terrorist bases, why we did not attack their military first. All this is covered in the book. So many of you who have questions on why this particular thing happened, I think you should read this book and you will know and the manner in which Pakistan retaliated and kept upping the ante and kept responding despite clear indications from our side as to what our objectives were and what we wanted to do. So the subsequent Indian decisive strike is also covered in great detail, and which brought the conflict to a rapid and swift end, with Pakistan begging for ceasefire. So I think for a student of modern history, it's very important, and for those who wish to engage in dialogue on the Indian viewpoint on Kashmir, as well as on the Op Sindoor, this book enlightens you to the extent that you can engage in a very, very intellectual discussion with anybody on the subject. Of course, there's a nice chapter on the aftermath, that when Operation Mahadev took place, and how those terrorists who were desperate to cross back into Pakistan after having executed the attack or the terrorist action, how they were caught, how they were neutralized, and how the Indian armed forces patiently stalked them over months and made sure that justice was served. The part 3 of the book, like General Shukla says, monumental changes have already happened in our military structure, but there is still a huge credibility gap vis-a-vis China, and therefore there is a need to leapfrog, like he has said so elusively. He has brought out the points that are needed to be done. Need to leapfrog. We need to have an asymmetric response, equip our nations with capabilities to conduct multi-domain operations, how we should develop Sudarshan Chakra and the space capabilities that we need, the budget, civil-military fusion that is needed to ensure that all capabilities are brought to bear at a particular point. If you have to pick up to response in 6 minutes like he has outlaid, then everybody needs to get involved. It has to be a whole of nation approach. and that's what he brings out in the book. What we need to do in terms of our industrial base and the importance of strategic communication. I think we must understand that though people say that we won the military war but lost the information war, but I think we are slowly clawing back on the information war, because serious students of military history and war colleges are studying this campaign and are mostly convinced of the Indian viewpoint. Now, if you look by the kind of articles and the kind of literature that is coming out from academia in the recent past. So slowly we are clawing it back. But yes, there is a need to do information warfare and win the information warfare at that time as well. But we must understand this information warfare has to be calibrated. So we can see that if you don't give an off-ramp to the adversary, you may continue to remain in conflict. Look what is happening in Iran. Iran is not getting an off-ramp to get out of the situation. But we did give, we had an off-ramp available because of the information war which Pakistan won, and therefore they were able also to save some amount of face. Otherwise, God knows, they could have continued for for much more time. So these are fine balances, and our experience now will tell us as to how it is to be done. And of course, India's nuclear shield and China's rapid modernization in the nuclear domain is very worrying. And our military readiness can only be achieved if outcomes are prioritized over processes. So I found the book extremely interesting and covering a whole range of Sindoor. I have a couple of questions for the authors, if they would care to answer in the later question and answer session. Is the rest of our apparatus keeping up with these changes? I mean, General Shukla mentioned that HAL is out of AMCA. Are our structures, current structures outside the military, we are doing military modernization, restructuring, but our structures outside the military still capable of responding at the pace that is desired? And can we keep up pace with what is happening, like on the Ukrainian front? For example, there are innovations every day. So if you actually order 100,000 Shahid type of drones today, and 6 months later they become obsolete, how do you upgrade them to bring them back into relevance? Because Ukraine and Russia are using these drones on a daily basis. They are expending large number of drones, so they can continue to keep buying new drones. But can you keep buying and keep stocking old technology drones? How do you do it? So these are questions that I think need some pondering. And in terms of restructuring our information war, what do we need to do? How do we have an all-of-nation approach? What structures do we need to make sure that we win the information war? And thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, General Rajesh. Thank you, Air Marshal Rajesh Kumar. I think these questions will be answered by General Katoch when he, I think, deals with the Q&A. But we have had a military perspective of this particular book. I think military is often accused of being hawkish as far as this issue is concerned. So I think to balance the views, I have Dr. Shalini Chawla. Dr. Shalini Chawla needs no introduction to this institution. I think she's a distinguished fellow with CAPS. Now it's got a big name. Earlier it was called as Center for Air Power Studies. So over to her, 10 to 15 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Alok. Thank you for inviting me here. And thank you, India Foundation, for having me. And, it's a privilege to discuss this very, very well written, very comprehensive book. A lot has been said about the book, about the subject. I'll try not to be repetitive, but let me begin by complimenting this brilliant work, which offers a very authoritative account of one of the most defining military operations in modern South Asian history, I would say. authored by two decorated, experienced military veterans. It provides insiders' perspectives, complexities of India-Pakistan relations, evolution of cross-border terrorism. As Alok said in the beginning, that's a very distinct part of the book because it gives you a full background of why Pahalgam happened, and then obviously a paradigm shift in India's posture. Now, the book is very meticulously structured into three parts. That's already been talked about. And what has been the defining aspect of India's doctrine here is that what General Katoch said, I was very, loved that word. He talked about sustained deterrence, which is what Operation Sindoor 2.0 talks about. So I would like to make 8 points here, very brief points. Very well covers the background of the Pahalgam attack, India's retaliation, Pakistan's strategy of bleeding India through 1,000 cuts, which it has followed for decades with the conviction that India does not have the appetite to retaliate. And even if India wanted to retaliate, international pressure would constrain it from exercising the military option. And I don't know if Alok, you remember, but many years back when Jamia used to have these very frequent sessions with the Pakistanis, this used to come out very overtly in their remarks. So Pakistan adopted the covert route from the time of partition when it launched the first attack in 1947 under the label of tribal revolt, and it has believed in the use of terror. Now, this belief is critical to understand as there has been no change, but rather a consistently, I would say, increasing reliance on terrorism, given the increasing gap between the growth trajectories of both the countries, India and Pakistan. And Islamabad has tried to compensate its vulnerabilities as a national power with the use of terror. And it obviously believed that 1,000 cuts would weaken India, challenge India's growth, and eventually we saw that the cuts started to get bigger. Now, terrorism is part of Pakistan's strategic culture. It comes out very beautifully in the first part. It's a very critical dimension of its power projection and its strategic calculus. And we don't only see this reliance on terror in Pakistan's foreign policy vis-a-vis India and Afghanistan, but also at the domestic level when you see that how it uses terror or suppression to deal with any form of opposition. Democratic leaders have always been behind bars. We see Imran Khan, the most popular leader, has been behind bars. And out of the 4 provinces, 2 provinces, KPK and Baluchistan, are consistently on fire. So it has rationalized the use of terror, using religion, which again has been highlighted in the book, that how Jammu and Kashmir religious factor was kind of inculcated. And obviously the cry for national security has been the rationale for the use of terror. The second point I want to make is that the central thesis of the book is very well encapsulated in the title itself, which is 88 Hours That Redefined Deterrence. Now, for decades, India's response to cross-border terrorism was constrained by the fear of retaliation under a nuclear overhang. And the nuclear factor has been critical in every crisis between India and Pakistan. It kind of has been there in every phase of tension that the both countries had. Now, Pakistan has adopted a first-use nuclear doctrine with the intention to create uncertainty and enhance deterrence. And in fact, Pakistan acquired nuclear weapons in 1987. And although the overt nuclearization happened much more, and at that time, in Major Aslam Beg, the army chief of Pakistan in 1989, in his speech said that Pakistan has lost all wars till now because of lack of strategic vision, but now it has a clear strategic vision and it has a doctrine of offensive defense. And defense in that doctrine obviously had to be provided by the nuclear umbrella, and Pakistan clearly intended to continue the offensive through the subconventional war. So Pakistan's nuclear weapons have been for war prevention to deter India from conventional response to its acts of terror. And in contrast, India's nuclear weapons and the doctrine, which finds mention at the end of the book, that our posture of NFU is with the objective of defending India against the use of nuclear weapons by the adversary. But India does have a doctrine of assured massive retaliation, and that itself works as as a deterrent. 3. The May 2025 strikes challenged the conviction of Pakistan that India cannot go beyond an estimated line of retaliation. So the perception of India's strategic restraint was challenged previously in Uri and Pulwama. But I think Pakistan was prepared for a limited strike after Pahalgam. But by executing deep strikes inside Pakistan and POK, India demonstrated the willingness and capability to push the perpetrators of terror without crossing the nuclear threshold. And the book emphasized that in the Indian retaliation, where it says, and I will quote, that it says that the aim was to control escalation at every step of the escalatory ladder. Point number 4, India did establish a clear space for conventional war above terrorism and below the nuclear threshold in the May 2025 conflict. And this was, interestingly, the concept of, conventional war, of limited war under the nuclear overhang was first pronounced by George Fernandez, our defense minister, in this very hall in 1999 in a seminar which was titled Limited War IDSA. And I was a young scholar, I had just joined IDSA, and he talked about it, and it generated massive debate in IDSA in Pakistan. And eventually Pakistan pronounced the infamous red lines, which Khalid Kidwai talked about in an interview to the Italian journalist in 2002 while Parakram was underway. Although the interview was interestingly recorded in 2000 itself, but then it was published in 2002, and that's what Pakistan does in every phase of crisis and tension. It does use the nuclear threat in various forms. So the red lines have been redefined after Op Sindoor, and we have seen Najam Sethi, one of the Pakistan's commentator, he talked about the new red lines after Operation Sindoor, and there's not much difference, but yes, it has an additional component of Indus Water Treaty now. The operation altered the strategic calculus in South Asia, establishing a new normal where state-sponsored terrorism will be met with swift and kinetic responses. And in fact, we have seen Pakistan following exactly the same strategy of what it is doing in response to TTP's terror attacks against Afghanistan, where it holds Afghan Taliban responsible for patronizing the TTP. A very interesting aspect that we have seen in the geopolitical phenomena during the May conflict has been shift in the regional partnerships. That was this was a very critical part of this conflict. The bonhomie that Munir and Trump, their romance, a rapid reset of Pakistan's relationship with the United States, which was in trouble since 2023, 2024, reinforcement of the Saudi-Pakistan relationship, the defense agreement between both the countries was signed. And then obviously we saw Turkey's intensified cooperation, and we had those alignments and realignments happening in that phase. And Pakistan's actions, if we see from January 2025, were very focused on building its relationship with the US. Much before Pahalgam, it almost felt like they were building up the base for the Pahalgam attack. And in January, we saw how step-by-step approach was there in a very structured manner to build up relationship with the United States, handing over of ISIS militant Sharifullah to United States, the crypto deal, critical minerals, everything happened just before Pahalgam. The book talks about it, that in the section on the lessons from the conflict, that what we have seen, the emerging dynamic trends in the recent conflicts, that there is external support to the actors engaged in the war. So you have in the Russian-Ukraine war, we have seen that Ukraine has support of United States, then Iran has support from China and Russia. And then we also saw in Op Sindoor how Pakistan was developing that support system. I would like to quote from the book where it talks about these shifts and realignments in the crisis, that India needs to maintain an edge, and the concept of Atmanirbharta cannot be overstated. And I think this is an extremely deep and meaningful statement, like many other quotes in the book, but I really saw that this has to be thought through in a very serious manner. And this is very essential for a big power like India to navigate its rise and balance itself. Next, during Op Sindoor, India's conventional superiority was unquestionable. We have read it, we have heard from Marshal Rajesh Kumar also. Its ability to manage cyber warfare during the conflict has been elaborated in great detail in the book, which actually I also didn't read before that, which was quite good. But most important part here has been the civil-military synergy. A recurring theme in the book is the necessity of seamless civil-military relation. And General Katoch has previously written extensively on the subject, and he has emphasized that very beautifully, that the success of Op Sindoor was predicted on the absolute alignment between political leadership's strategic objectives and military's operational execution. So I think book is definitely, it serves as a case study of how the political directives can lead to a victory if the synergy is there, and that has been talked about in the discussion. But yes, there are crucial lessons to be learned, and the most important lesson which Air Marshal Rajesh Kumar also highlighted is need for India to work towards strategic communication. Our strategic communication was, I would say, weak, and gave Pakistan space for the first lie. It had the advantage of the first lie. And we saw how Pakistan built the narrative of victory despite suffering the military loss. And the entire narrative has been built around May 7th, and there has been no talk about 8th, 9th, and 10th. And then it is obviously reaping the dividends of that narrative at the domestic level. We've seen the whole power dynamics in Pakistan has gone for a complete change, with Asim Munir being now all-powerful military institutions. Power has been redefined, and more importantly, the limited, the most potent democratic institution, the judiciary's power has been really curtailed and suppressed. So we see this major shift within Pakistan after that. Now with these details, one can probably make some analysis of Pakistan's strategic posture vis-a-vis India in the coming time. And now, where after 1 year of Operation Sindoor, where does Pakistan stand? Because of Iran crisis, we have seen that it has positioned itself as a peacemaker. It's in an all-time diplomatic high. It has fetched global goodwill, also managed financial dividend. Now, how do we see Pakistan in the coming years? And I feel it will continue the narrative of victory and victimhood at the same time. Military modernization will continue. We have seen the submarines, coming from China, from Turkey, also new agreements have been signed. And the nuclear posture of Pakistan, although, I don't use the word called bluff, because I feel that is really undermining Pakistan's posture, and we should not be doing that. So I always use the term, the nuclear position was challenged, yes, sure. But that challenging of nuclear position, does that imply that Pakistan will reduce its reliance on nuclear weapons? No. It will continue to rely on nuclear weapons, its nuclear posturing, its first use, enhancing deterrence through that. And this is a very integral part of Pakistan's strategic posturing there. So we see that even in the May conflict, nuclear threat was raised repeatedly. Pakistan is building up the nuclear capability at a much faster rate. With the Fatah series has been, the tests have been continuing with the Chinese support. It will raise the issue of Indus Water Treaty and at the World Bank, and obviously we have seen that how it has managed both US and China together. Now, Pakistan at the moment is emboldened, and that I want to just at the end, raise two questions here. That will the emboldened Pakistan, number one, use this time to build up its core national strength, or kind of second question is that what does an emboldened Pakistan mean for India? Because in the past, previous years and emboldened Pakistan has not been good news for us. And I think in the beginning of the book, General Katoch says that Pakistan will not change, but we have debted them. Yes. So now to be able to reduce the impact, we have debted them, but they will still do it. So reduce the impact of a Pakistan strategy. The answer lies in build-up of the national power, which General Shukla talked about it. But I'll just going to add one more point to the building of the national power there, that, our diplomatic posture, our position in the neighborhood would be very critical. How do we drive regional integration as a big power? India's aim to be the 5 trillion economy will need that regional, the integration there, how it takes up that role, and how the neighboring states will reap up the benefits of India's drive, economic growth. So I'm going to end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shalini. I think you rightly brought out, I think the biggest takeaway from Sindoor was that it proved that there was a space for limited war under the nuclear overhang. And I think that fact needs to be appreciated. Sindoor was a very brief conflict as compared to other conflicts. And as a result, the dividends that would have accrued to India internationally did not accrue to us. And we need to be very clear as far as that is concerned. It was definitely not Dhaka in 1971. It was also not like Kargil. When you saw Nawaz Sharif walking in Washington, D.C. on a national holiday in the United States to meet the US president. So obviously, a lot of narratives have been created. And I think those narratives need to be given due cognizance. And as Shalini said, it has created an emboldened Pakistan. Now, whatever be the case, the fact is that Pakistan suffered militarily, but probably did not suffer geopolitically. After Sindoor, it had a defense pact with Saudi Arabia. And that pact, after the recent Gulf War, has actually brought in more than $7 billion. Not a small thing. During the Gulf War, Pakistan did shift military equipment to Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and did have interactions with Iranians as far as attacks on Saudi Arabia was concerned. If you actually analyze the attacks by Iran on various Gulf states, while UAE has been the primary target and continues to face the brunt, Saudi Arabia relatively has been hit relatively much lesser. So there are a lot of issues that we need to analyze. Oversimplification of facts often leads to disastrous consequences, actually. We had just 1 year down the line, yesterday we had 2 blasts in Punjab. The police immediately came out with statement attributing blames. I think one of the realizations from Sindoor was that the blame should always be attributed after a little bit of time, actually. So to make it more realistic and to carry greater conviction internationally, at least, with certain proofs and evidences that would actually make it better. And I think this is a point. Of course, ideally, should security agencies be telling who's behind it immediately after reaching the spot? To my mind, that needs to be discussed. That's an issue which we'll probably have to think about it. But it also shows that last 1 year we had nothing. So obviously somebody is trying to do it. Whether it is ISI, as it's been claimed, which is, there is no doubt, there is an emboldened Pakistan. Pakistan always believes that they need to create turbulence within Pakistan, within India, and that's what they believe. And for a change, today, you have an army chief who's de facto controlling Pakistan. In fact, after Musharraf, you have never had this sort of a situation where an army chief is far more powerful than the prime minister. So much so. See, army chiefs have always been very powerful in Pakistan. internally. But at least externally, it was always the democratically elected leaders. But for the first time, it is Field Marshal and his Prime Minister. That's the fact. That's how the White House calls them, the Field Marshal and his Prime Minister. That's the statement that's been used. So obviously, the army has gained. The conflict has allowed Asim Munir to lord over the other two services. He's become a permanent chief of defense force. Not that earlier there was the other forces, but there were technically the feasibility of a naval officer or an air force officer becoming the CDF, but that was not there. In fact, after Admiral Sirohi, I think there were 2 naval officers and 1 air chief who became the joint chiefs of staff. But I think he's become a permanent. So there are issues which we need to analyze, and I think this analysis is essential. And I think as a nation, what Sindoor proved was that the entire country came together, and this whole of nation approach is what we need to commend actually, and that is what is commendable. And in fact, as the book is absolutely a worth read actually. It's a very quick work that General Katoch and Suruchit Prakashan has done it. Of course, if I had to do a critical analysis of the publisher, I would say there is no indexing. For a book like this, indexing is a must, which actually should have been there. But I can understand that requires time, and I think paucity of time has its own implications. I've taken a little time because we had only 2 discussants. Usually we have 3, but since there were 2 authors, I thought it would be prudent to curtail the number of discussants to 2. It's now open for questions, comments. Please try and be brief, and we'll take from there and then come this side. Please identify yourself and try and be brief as much as you can.
Thank you. My name is Raja Munib. I would like to know, Shalini ma'am, when you say that Pakistan would look at, if it's getting emboldened, which it surely is, it will be looking at building its core strengths. I would just like you to briefly explain what basically Pakistan's core strengths are. What are we looking at, what they're going to bring in? Second thing on, what are Pakistan's core strengths? What are you looking at that they would, go back on building up? What is Pakistan's core strength? That is question number 1. Question number 2, Alok sir, you said that, on a diplomatic front with the Saudi Arabian defense deal, they have been able to bring in $7 billion. But the reality is the $5 billion they have brought in is just the rollover of the loan which they were supposed to pay the Saudis off, and $2 billion is what they had to pay the UAE off. So where exactly is Pakistan gaining financially out of its diplomatic endeavors with Saudi Arabia or with vis-a-vis US? Because if you look at the latest IMF diktat, the Pakistanis have been, have to give away with their, I'm sorry, I forgot the SFC thing, where they cannot even now, have any tariffs or have any, cannot sell it to any entity. So these 2 questions I have.
Yeah.
Powers have been taken away.
Thank you, Captain Bansal. I am Jitendra Ojha, a prematurely retired Joint Secretary and former Head of Training at Cabinet Secretariat. I'm a visiting faculty on geopolitics and security with certain institutions outside India. I have just one observation carrying forward from where Captain Bansal said and General Shukla said. Pakistan has a utility for major powers. Pakistan has a utility for major powers, and that's what demonstrates that even after Operation Sindoor, major powers are feeling that the kind of networks and the capacities it has, they are useful for them. So this strategic deterrence we are talking about, we should be prepared, because even after 1971, we felt that military gave us a wonderful victory, but we could not capitalize upon this. Operation Sindoor, again, as you said, amazing synergy between political leadership and defense forces, but we have to carry forward. And then I come down to what General Shukla said. We need to build a culture of statecraft. This is what we have been under foreign occupation for far too long. And when I'm talking about building a culture of statecraft, I'm a follower of the ancient philosophy of Usanas, that only one principle is there, that is statecraft. Or the only dharma is Raj Dharma, and from there flows everything else. So we need to build a culture of innovation, excellence, technology, whatever General Shukla was saying. And political leadership has a limitation. Bureaucratic leadership has a limitation. So members of strategic community like this who have been practitioners, scholars, deep experiences, and others, we need to see how can we shape our internal surroundings, isn't it? We are surviving so far on a borrowed structure, borrowed model, and borrowed principles. We need to develop indigenous thinking. and based on very scientific thinking. And we have to shape our external surroundings as well. So there's need for a lot of innovations, and I will urge members of this community, especially younger scholars, that we need to carry a lot of work in that direction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alok. I'm General Bakshi. I had co-authored the book which Rajesh was mentioning about. My question is to Professor Shalini. Both Shalini and Rajesh, you mentioned about strategic communication and information warfare, and you said we were weak. My question is, when you say we, who was the we in Ops Sindoor? Because for 3 days we had the foreign secretary with an army officer and an air force officer standing, giving a brief and not taking questions. On the 11th of May, when everything was over, you put 4 officers up there, Army, Navy, Air Force and General Sharda, and that day you took questions. But actually it is the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting who had a media war room. And in our meeting with the CDS, overnight, the Army, Navy, Air Force deputed 1 officer there. So how do you see this shaping up? Who was the we in Ops Sindoor? And tomorrow, will we have an integrated we who will fight this narrative battle better? Something like what the last gentleman spoke about. When you talk of statecraft, you need to have a strong control over the narrative. How do you see this shaping up? Thank you.
What we'll do is that we'll take one more question and then have the first round of answers. Yeah, start.
Good evening, sir. How do you see the AFPAC region with our relationship with Afghanistan playing into our relationship with Pakistan? And how do you see the US still having tolerance, although we are overplaying this Asim Munir relationship? The CIA is still funding the Afghan Taliban $40 to $60 million a week, and they are not making any noises about TTP.
Okay, I'll just go in the reverse order, starting with Shalini.
See, like I said, in the past, we have seen whenever it is in that phase of, close relationship with the major power, a space of strategic relevance, which it has enjoyed at multiple phases in, during the Cold War, in the 80s, and then post 9/11, and now we have seen that, it gets emboldened to conduct whatever the actions against us. What are Pakistan's strength is that, the core strength is one authority it has. It has just the military which takes the decisions. There's no accountability to the people. There's total militarized approach which sees the object, who has an object, which with the objective of maintaining the supremacy of the military institution, which lies in raising India's threat. And then it has the non-state and state actors both supporting it. At this point in time, obviously, non-state actors have been its strength. It has tremendous nuisance value. And then you see at the state level, you have China, which has an unconditional support for Pakistan. And then at the moment, US doesn't look like it's going to be questioning strategic calculus of Pakistan. So you have the external dynamics of Pakistan, I think, are its core strength. If you see where it gets emboldenment. Internally, yes, the state is crumbling, but it's like a continuously ailing state, which is even a bigger issue for us. But the external factors are so strong that it continues to have that sense of emboldenment, which kind of motivates it to do these actions repeatedly. Sir, your question about who are we, I think you are we here, so you have been into policy there. But coming to the narrative building, I think, sir, we have talked about it, discussed, and I think in even your discussion. So maybe a more institutionalized approach to the narrative building will be a good time, which kind of can continue the perception management in this age of social media. The one is obviously during the crisis you do it. But the other factor is that what do we kind of do for our perception management consistently outside India? For example, if you go today to Washington, every single think tank will have Pakistanis sitting there. You will barely find Indians sitting in the think tank. So obviously those are, multiple things. So it has to be a comprehensive approach with policymakers, military, and academia for sure, which can kind of build up this. And it has to be a very structured, institutionalized approach, a long-term management which needs to be done. On the question on Afghanistan, what was your question? How does US see it? I didn't understand what were you trying to ask, actually, sorry. You want to answer that? Okay. I mean, I just.
I can repeat it. We are overplaying Asim Munir's relationship with Trump. Okay.
No, what do. Yeah, I heard
We
that
are not
part,
looking
yeah.
into the US's tolerance of the TTP, and the US still funding $40 to $60 million to the Taliban, which continues. And I just wanted to add, Russia recently recognized the Taliban. So
Yeah.
how does that play out?
I mean, recognizing, I don't know, is a very superficial term here because Chinese also have their ambassadors. So we will continue what we have to do at Afghanistan. I think Alok wants to add there. But I don't think we are overplaying it. We are talking more because we are just large number of people. But I am not so convinced on the overplaying it. What we have to do, we are still doing it. But this is something which definitely raises multiple questions and, dimensions get added to Pakistan's strategic posturing. And one needs to give it a very serious thought. Yeah, thank you.
I'll just answer a few questions before I move to Rajesh and finally to General Katoch. I think since Mujib asked me, you said core strength and how has Saudi Arabia pact helped it? Yeah. Okay, let me come to that. 5 billion rollover, agreed. 2 billion countering UAE's pullout. Please understand, that's a very significant thing because our media played it up that UAE asked for the money back, which is a big thing. But immediately Saudi Arabia did it. The fact is, about 2 years back, State Bank of Pakistan had $3 billion foreign exchange reserve. Today it has more than $17 billion. So there is a difference, whether you like it or not. Now, it is borrowed money, it is IMF dictated, everything is acceptable. Last year, they got remittances equal to $38 billion, $38.3 billion to be precise. This year, they have already gone 9% higher than this, and they'll probably, at this stage, they'll cross $40 billion by the end of the year. Their financial year, in any case, is July to June, just for your clarification. That's what I just wanted to say. So, to say that it's not benefited them, I don't agree with that part of it. The fact that they mediated has given them prominence. You may say that prominence is nothing important. I agree. Because last time they sought this sort of prominence was in 71 when Pakistan actually disintegrated, when they were trying to link up US with China. But it does give them prominence for the time being, whether we like it or we don't like it. That's the part. As far as Sumir Bhasin's point is, like US also has a very powerful bureaucracy like India. And it's a hydra-headed monster. One agency is doing something and they want to hedge their bets. So there is no doubt that they are in communication with Taliban. They are also in communication with Baloch nationalists. They are in communication with Asim Munir. They want to have their connections with everybody. Aren't US in touch with Kurds? They are in touch with Kurds also. They are in touch with everybody else. So that's a fact. That's how they've been. They are in touch with Syrian government. They are in touch with Damascus. They are in touch with Tel Aviv. So how does it make a difference? They want to they want to hedge their bets. They are in connection with everybody. That's how they do it. And that's the way they'll continue to do it. AFPAC relations and India-Pak relations will remain. I think we have a good tactical understanding with Taliban. But please understand, for ideological reasons, a long-term relationship with Taliban, to my mind, does not seem feasible.
Okay, so I'll take this, who's we a little further. I think we discussed it, being co-authors, we've discussed it many times. But the fact is that if you have to have a narrative, then you have to stick to it. So I'll just give a specific example. Just yesterday, Elizabeth Threlkeld, who is the South Asia editor of Stimson, has brought out an article saying that on the eve of Op Sindoor has stated that the thrust of our article is that in the next round, it'll escalate further. Okay, so if that is what the American think tanks are saying, it is obviously, there are two fellows in Stimson who are permanently there from the Pakistan side, 0 from India. So the Indian input is very much not there. And that's what narrative building and influence is all about. So therefore, we need a much more coordinated response at the national level. It doesn't matter whether it's under Ministry of INB, whether it's under, defense, as long as that section is empowered it can be anybody. It doesn't matter. But that person should be empowered and everybody should speak the same language. And that's what we need at the national level. This turf battle cannot carry on. And we need to make sure that, this dialogue that takes place in the narrative building, it is not something that is to be done within those 88 hours, but it is long after that. And to counter the so-called victimhood, as well as some of the belligerent threats that emerge from Pakistan. And it's not just Pakistan. You must understand that there is support of China. And China has built a very, very strong information regime. And if they continue to support, as far as information operations are concerned, Pakistan gets support from the West as well as from the East. So it requires a redoubling of effort from our side to make sure that we are able to counter this narrative, and we have to build relationships, and we have to make sure that our point of view is heard. So that's where the younger scholars, more research, and countering with facts some of the articles that appear in the Western media, and surely your voice will be heard, because our voice is getting heard. When we gave the necessary proofs for those 88 hours, people are now making sure that this thing. So just to add on your Pak-Afghan relationship, in a recent meeting with the Chinese officials, Taliban apparently told them that, we're getting $40 to $60 million every week from the US, and we're getting peanuts from China. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? The Chinese said that the trouble is not of our making. You need to sort out your own troubles. So there are many elements to this Af-Pakistan relationship, and I think we'll leave that for another day.
I'd actually recommended that we need what we call a national information advisor. Like the NSA, we require an NIA, and that will coordinate the efforts. Otherwise, in my various debates on television on this particular issue, the biggest problem which we have faced is the internal dissonance within India. So when we look at aircraft losses or all the negative claims which came up, they came from Indian politicians only to score political points. But they don't realize that while scoring those political points, you're hurting the military. That was one. You had given this point on restructuring our industrial base, etc. We will have to get the private sector into every aspect of defense manufacturing. And I think when we are looking at the public sector, they should confine themselves to upper-end technologies which can be funded, and leave the field open for the private sector. That sort of synergy has to be built in between the private sector, the government, and the military, so that there is an assurance of buying what is being produced. Otherwise, we'll still lose that race. One more point I just wanted to give, this Pakistan relationship with the United States. I've been studying this a very great deal. In my view, the Americans will use each and any person they get. It doesn't really matter. If they find India useful, they'll use India, otherwise they'll use Pakistan, and when that use is not there, they will throw it. The Americans are the most focused state as far as their national interest is concerned. And when their national interest matters, if it means getting into Pakistan, they'll get them back again. And they became friendly with Pakistan, which I have commented upon, was one very simple reason: they had to sort out Iran. And to get to Iran, you needed a friendly Pakistan. So they will do whatever they have to do. I think we will do what we have to do. And as a deterrent posture, I have advocated one very simple fact. If you are not prepared to accept pain, you can never deter. So when we tell the Pakistanis that, okay, you got a nuclear bomb, I tell them, throw it. Throw one, throw two, throw three. We will destroy you. That is deterrence. If you are not prepared to get a pain, if you are not prepared to get hurt, you can't deter. Alok.
Thank you, Captain. I just wanted to, I don't know if the book highlighted that we noticed the tendency that when there are two countries are fighting, there is always a superpower who claim the credit for stopping these wars. I mean, they did mention in this book. The second part is with the Sindoor operation, which we have been witnessing, is that it has not altered the power of balance. I mean, the power of balance between India and Pakistan, but it had made it more dangerous, that it is more, you are more prepared for a war rather than preparing for a retreat. If you can just highlight these 2 points.
Hi, this is Jiten. I teach information warfare at many of the defense institutions. I have just 2 quick points to make and leave for the speakers to elaborate upon. One is, if you see at Balakot or Sindoor or even the surgical strikes, it is now evidently clear that there is never going to be any clear victory for any of the parties in conflict. It is all going to be, shaped by the perception and the claims of victory. And what we are missing out today is that public memory and the institutional memories for the next 30 or 40 years to come will now not be, held in the books or the papers. It will be in the artificial intelligence and AI. And all the top 7 AI engines today, including Claude, ChatGPT, Grok, whatever you name it, you just search Operation Sindoor or Swift Retort or Bunyad-e-Masroos or Operation Bandar. You will be surprised that, our narrative is not even 5% there. We have been posed as, people defeated by a great state of Pakistan. So I think we must focus on information warfare equally what we are doing in the battlefield. Because, and second point I want to make is that if you look at ISPR, we are looking at an institution of 600, 700 people professionally, running an information warfare narrative. If you look at Operation Sindoor or, in Balakot, we are looking at few individuals. And I just want to finish with 2 lines. If you look at Sindoor or Balakot, in defense briefings, I think is done by foreign secretary and the people, defense secretary is absent. So I think we must introspect that sometimes we need to see that ADGPI with whole branch of, responsibility of information warfare is not even visible when it comes to it. You have some random individuals being popped up. So I think we have something to introspect, that when we are countering ISPR, are we getting defeated on paper and the stroke of a pen? Thank you.
Sir, General Katoch, sir, the way you have written redefined deterrence, is deterrence a time bound or it's a unlimited time or daily basis? And second, is it deterrence to only Pakistan or neighborhood China or USA the way attacked Noor Khan Center?
I'll just request to respond. You need not answer all questions. You need to be brief. Just take about 1 minute each.
Firstly, I agree with the points on information warfare. We need to do that. I've got no doubts about it. Your point, sir, you mentioned...
Great power.
No, you mentioned the American involvement, and has it been mentioned in the book? Yes. And I have mentioned in great detail why they did it, including Vice President Vance's talk with Narendra Modi just on the day and the response, etc., including Kirana Hills and what happened. So that bit is there. And sorry, your point was?
Deterrence against whom?
On deterrence. This particular deterrence is against China, is against Pakistan. But if it works against Pakistan, it'll work with everybody. That is the... No, it's not time. No. Deterrence is deterrence. There's no problems.
No cross talks, please. Yeah.
Okay, so very briefly, the information warfare, you're right. We have to look at, when we look at AI, even if you type, which is the most dangerous conflict, nuclear conflict, it'll come as India-Pak. Okay, whereas India-Pak is actually not the most dangerous place as far as nuclear this thing. But there are millions of articles which have been written in the past which have been classifying this as this. So that's what we said. We need to counter the narrative. We need to research more. We need to counter our articles. If they come up on the pages, LLM will eventually find them. Okay, so we have to start now. And like I said, our narrative is starting to gain some traction. So we need to continue on this. And of course, you're right. One of the seminars, it was emphasized that in a conflict situation, a briefing by the military carries much more weight than people from other services. So I think we should learn from this, have people trained in the military who can lead the discussion, who can take questions, and who can counter the narrative. I think that will help.
Yes, the environment has become more dangerous because the conflict that we saw in May was much, many more steps above the estimated escalation ladder, what one would presume. And then, Pakistan has gained that relevance. It is also emboldenment. So we have to really introspect and assess that what does that emboldenment mean for us, and how do we reduce or deter that emboldenment. And their narratives are very important, and very important will be our strategic signaling, which is also, a dimension of narrative, I would say.
I think for any information warfare or anything, you have to be visible, then credible, and then relevant. Unfortunately, very often our troll army tries to be relevant before being credible or visible. And that's a very big self-goal, as we saw by the media during Op Sindoor. So please understand, these 3 stages have to be followed consequentially. You have to be visible, then credible, and then relevant, not try to do it the other way around. At the end, I think I must thank all of you. I think I must thank the authors, thank the speakers and the discussants for taking time out to be here with us. And above all, I think this huge attendance that we see here, we are really grateful to you. And I think our next program is on 26th May here, same place, same time, on the geopolitics of energy security, which has become a relevant issue, although today both US and Iran have said that the war has probably ended, hopefully, and some negotiations are starting. But this issue will continue to remain relevant, and we'll be discussing this issue on 26th May at same place, same time. Once again, thank you very much for taking time out to be here with us. Thank you so much.